Hello, folks. This is your host, Tammy Tuckey, and you are now listening to the Tiara Talk Show. We bring you rare interviews with the makers of Disney magic. Whether they be singers, actors, Imagineers, animators, they have all made their mark on the Disney name. Be sure to check out the show notes, other episodes, contests, our social media pages from Facebook to Twitter, and more on our official website at www.thetiaratalkshow.com. All guest opinions are theirs and theirs alone and do not represent the opinions of the Tiara Talk Show or the host. The Tiara Talk Show is not associated with the Disney Company. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. And from all of us here at the Tiara Talk Show, have a hoop-de-doo day. Adventure in Wonderland. Adventure in Wonderland. I'm excited to welcome this week's Tiara Talk Show guests, Robert Barry Fleming and Harry Waters Jr. to the show. Welcome, you two.
Hello. Hello from Minneapolis, which is where I'm currently residing and teaching.
Hello, I am currently in Washington, D.C. Robert here.
It's so great to have you both on the show to talk about Adventures in Wonderland. And for listeners who do not know what Adventures in Wonderland is, it was a TV show that took place in the early 90s on Disney Channel about Alice who got to visit Wonderland. Harry, you played Tweedle Dee, and Robert played Tweedle Dum.
That's correct.
We were the brothers that danced through Wonderland
in MC Hammer outfits.
Yes. Well, I must say that in the initial outfits were a surprise, but they were also very kitschy because it was 1991-92, so it was prime time for MC Hammer. And at that time, that's just sort of what worked for us. And for me, it was great to have that transition that I think we were the only real characters that got to sort of change our outfits through the course of the show.
Yeah, it was actually, I look back at it and I'm reminded that the wonderful Lois D'Armand won for Outstanding Costume Design. And it was won her Daytime Emmy around that in '95. And I think it really spoke to just how inventively she kind of transitioned what was a traditional and original idea of Alice in Wonderland and all of those wonderful characters into something that was at the time contemporary and of the moment and in a way that was accessible to families. And so the whole concept of the show and the whole kind of excitement around that kind of transitioning into something that was contemporary, that was classic, was a really, really fun thing to be a part of.
I always thought that was wonderful. Can you give a little backstory behind the actual audition for the TV show?
What I remember audition was Harry bringing his months-old son to the He was like the most beautiful kid ever, and he had brought and that is like one of the main impressions at that audition that we had so much fun. But he had just become a father and has two wonderful boys now who are grown men.
Who are grown,
and, completely grown men, making us feel much older than we should ever feel at this stage of life. But that was my biggest impression of how fun and just goofy we got to be, and that I was watching Harry start this whole new wonderful part of his life with his boys.
It was an amazing time because I remember at a couple of the auditions that we couldn't find a babysitter at the time, so I had to take him with me for a rehearsal, and I'm holding him in my arms and just sort of rocking back and forth, and then you have to put him in the Moses basket because, okay, now we've got to work on this number. And he grew up around the lot, and now he is 25, and he's also
a dancer.
Yes, he's 25. Yes, he is. Wow. Jordan Waters, he lives in New York. He went to Cal Arts, got a BFA in dance, but he's also an actor. And he's been touring the world with 2 different companies. But I think that there was something about being in that environment where there was so much live animation, because that's really what I kind of felt like, is that we were animation come to life every week. And usually it was because we were doing 2 shows a week, we had to double up on that energy. And that sort of just fed us into such a stage where we really had to rest on our day off, really importantly.
And that cast, I mean, it's got to be said, it was like graduate school for comedic acting. It was so much fun to work with so many talented comic actors and who were just so skilled also as musical artists.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like everyone had kind of this theater background. We were all this really interesting anomaly of LA talent that were really groomed in being all around performers. So people could act, they could sing, they could move. They, had an impeccable timing and were just so fun to watch and work with. And that was the greatest joy, I think. And to watch Elizabeth, we would just have so much fun watching her take all of that and become such an incredible performer herself in her adult years. It was just really fun to kind of mark so many passages of time with watching people come to maturity as artists and as people.
And I want to mention that the show talks about several different topics, and some of them are very serious. You know, there's one episode where you have Marlee Matlin coming on the show, and you guys learn sign language. And there was also an episode where all the guys said no girls in the club, but also having a great resolution by the end. Did you guys have a specific episode or lesson that was told in an episode that you really, really enjoyed?
There was a great one that it was about addiction. It was about drug use. But it was coming about because my brother kept eating these apples that were not good for him. And what was interesting for me, it was about I couldn't help him. He had to want to do it. And it was a very simple and subtle way of giving kids that information about you have a choice about what you do and what you put in your body. But also, you can't save anybody that's doing that.
And I think we also had an episode, and I don't think you're referencing the same one I'm going to reference, but one where I would eat all of this junk food, and I got really.
Oh my God! That was the funniest thing.
Harry had to literally roll me around like a ball because I had eaten so much that I ate so much weight. So. You know, the writers on that show, Daryl Busby and Tom, they tied. I mean, I hate to reduce everything down to winning daytime Emmys, but the fact that they tied with Sesame Street for their win in '94, for me, that was really speaking to Sesame Street when I was growing up was the real deal in terms of kind of helping kids to get a kind of moral center and understand what it was to grow and become a part of society, you know, that whole process. And to think that we were a part of that. I ended up teaching for a number of years, and I would have students who would go through a whole semester with me, and at the end they'd get this quizzical look on their face, and then their face would explode and say, "Oh my God, you were Tweedle Dum. I used to watch you." And they were completely bored in my theater 101 classes until that moment where it was like, "Wait a minute, you were that guy on that show." And it was, you know, it was really, really fun to kind of have a recognition years later how impactful that was for so many young people who are now adults and moving into life, and you know, being an educator, I get the fun of watching that happen a good deal. But it was great to have it happen with something that was as fun as that show.
It kind of legitimizes you in a certain way, even though, well, obviously we are pretty good teachers because we're still here. Those of us that are stuck being a chair of a department, God bless you, Robert. I don't know how you did that for many years.
And congratulations, too, by the way.
And it's always interesting how certain people have varied memories of what you do and how you do it. My parents have a picture of all of us singing with President Clinton at the inauguration.
Yeah.
That was the kids' inauguration ball that he had with Mr. Rogers and Vanessa Williams and the cast of Adventures in Wonderland. And that's something that I always say that's just why I get to give back, Because how often do you get to like hang out and sing with the President of the United States in a character costume?
Can you tell some of those funny stories from behind the scenes, maybe a mess up or two, or playing pranks on one another?
I have to say that every week, Patty Colombo, who is still a most amazing choreographer to me, to be able to do that many dances that often and all new continuously, she never gave us a break. But also for me, I had to keep up with Robert. I will give that honest declaration because his energy was like nonstop. It's like, man, can you not dance so full out? Because it means that I had to dance full out.
Well, it was so amazing. Patty, here to Patty. We also had Roz Zeisler do some of the choreography as well.
Oh, yes.
But
right.
Patty did the majority of it, and Patty's just jubilant spirit, always infused, always inspired, always challenged, and always kind of made it, something really fun to kind of like, where could we possibly run, climb, jump, flip off of. And but I will tell you, I can't think of as many, the real jokesters, I think, were Patrick, in spite of the fact that he was in that bunny costume that had to be air conditioned and ventilated. I mean, that in itself was just like watching a comic science project. But also Richard Kuhlman, you couldn't get him to stop improving when he was the Cheshire Cat, and really, really fun. There were more than a couple of gag reels that were so fun, and watching it, like, always the blooper reels were a riot.
Who was one of your favorite guest stars on the show?
Pat Sajak was on there.
Yeah, Sajak was a blast.
Yes. I would have to say that my favorite, and because I'm really biased, because they were actually able to return, was Ken Page. Because he was the walrus. And
amazing.
And he had an invisible friend.
Pinniped.
That's
the
right.
invisible.
Pinniped. Oh my
yeah.
God.
It couldn't have been more of a blast to be on set with, musical theater legends. Both Ken and Armelia were in the original Ain't Misbehavin'. You may know that Harry was the original Belize and Angels in America. I mean, these people are a part of theater history. And to be able to be on a set and work with them and get to know them and call them my friends was a absolute thrill for me. And what a great way to kind of be initiated into the industry and on the West Coast. It was really fun.
The work that we did was nobody works like that anymore or since.
Right.
And it was something that we didn't know that we could have been doing it differently. It was just what the job required. It was 2 shows a week, and that's just how it worked out. I think at a certain point we realized we're working harder than most people in Los Angeles because we really can't do anything else but the show. So to get an opportunity to have a break was a joy. But then at the end, we did 100 shows of this amazing event. And so what else could we possibly do? For myself, it was great because I actually took a break and moved to San Diego. And there had another son. So there became this opportunity that's when I actually started teaching, because I realized that there was so much that was given to me. I mean, I can direct a show now because of doing Adventures in Wonderland in a day. I know how to stage things, and I can make it funny and make it work because I got all that training while I was doing all of these shows by just paying attention and being in the room.
Yeah, here. We had 3 tremendous directors with Shelley Jensen and David Grossman and the terrific Carrie Halverson. Mm-hmm. It was impossible not to learn from their vast experience, from everything from, Shelley was doing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as well. And
right.
Gary
was the time?
Had done so much. And these guys were very, very skilled. And you kind of think it's like, wow, this is just a great, fun, silly kind of thing. But there was so much amazing craft that was happening on that set. And the way that you were absorbing it was kind of like just through your pores, because we were just working and working and working. So many seminal things we did. We worked through the riots. We worked through the trial. There were all of these seminal events kind of happening at the same time, and we were learning what it meant to be a community in that imaginary world and in the real world of that, working on that set. And it was a really, really special kind of family of people who ended up all being hired to be there to do this work, but really kind of finding a real community and a home with all of our colleagues on it. So it was pretty incredible.
Do you guys remember shooting the final episode, which was the scary Halloween episode where you all sat by the fire telling scary stories to one another?
That was a very hard time, I have to say.
It was, we had a tremendous producer, Stan Brodsky, who passed while we were doing the show and he, it was hard not to remember only all the wonderful guest stars and people who had come and joined our family for a little while, and some were celebrities and some were, but I think of people like Stan who had, contributed in such a meaningful way, and that was kind of the lasting mark that of his career, because that was probably the last thing that he did. It made it all the more special to kind of watch people grow up like Elizabeth, and watch people pass and watch people go through all these passages of life. It's like you have the work, and the work is great, but you mostly have the relationships when it's all said and done. And that it's awfully special to do a series. There's a lot of gigging you do in the business, and you're in and out, and there's fun things like you do a couple of days on a movie, and people are like, oh, you were in LA Confidential. That must have been so cool. And it's like, yeah, it was a couple of days. But this was something that was, a couple of years with a family. And that's like being on tour. They are just seminal, creative, and personal experiences in your life that kind of shape even as an adult.
I must say that this last year, because I was in this other movie before Adventures in Wonderland called Back to the Future. And so this last year, they had these 30-year anniversaries all everywhere. And it was so interesting, because you're mentioning that, Robert, that I'm in one scene in this movie, which is great. Thank you. It's been wonderful. I'm not going to complain at all. But I must say the amount of work that I had to do there was very simple, very fun. I got to record a record. Thank you, for Huey Lewis and the News. I got a gold record singing Earth Angel. But this show made me work in a totally different way. But as Robert says, you're connecting with all of these artists that you don't get to do really, intentionally, because you're just usually visiting and then you leave. But we were there. It was our house. It was our woods that they would rearrange, and we would be a part of that. And also to have that kind of experience is something that I kind of miss. I really love teaching. I really love directing. I still, of course, love acting. But to be able to do that on a regular basis, and of course, I love the idea that every week you were doing a new play. You were doing 2 new plays. And some weeks you had like 4 or 5 lines. Some weeks you had the entire script. And that made you have to keep your craft working. And I forget that a lot of people don't understand that that's the foundation of really good artists, is that 10,000 hours. The more you're working at it, the better you get. Sitting around and wishing that somebody would have you do something is not going to make you a better artist. Doing your work, whether it's making your own work or finding people to work with, is such an important element that I try and teach my students, because I want to go, there's things that I just know almost genetically because I've been doing this for so long. And being able to pass that off to the next generation, so to speak, is because of shows like this.
Again, as you both have stated, you've been doing so much since Adventures in Wonderland, teaching, starring in shows. Can you talk a little bit more about some of those highlights for yourself?
I've been doing a lot of theater here in the Twin Cities because they have such a great community of theaters and artists that I've been amazed. It was a flyover place, and I ended up getting this job at McAllister, and I at least do 1 to 2 plays per year. But the most important thing that's happened for me in the last 2 years was I was able to create a piece of theater that was also connected to the community with my son. And it was called AKA Father Sons. And we were able to get an NEA grant for it to develop it. And it was about the conversations that fathers and sons usually don't have about sexuality and sexual identity and masculinity. And especially in communities of color, it's something that's assumed. So we were going around to various groups of young men or groups of men in different sites. We would present our piece, which we called Performative Conversations, and we would get people to talk about these relationships. And we found it to be so powerful that we would ask permission if we could use some of their stories in our next iteration of the piece. And it started out being just really simple. My son's a dancer. I'm sort of a storyteller. I created some spoken word. We had another rapper that worked with us. And we traveled it around just the Twin Cities and greater Minnesota area. But it was so impactful that we didn't want to stop doing it. So this summer, I'm actually going to New York in a couple weeks to work with my son in creating a new piece that's also about fathers and sons, but we're going to place it and base it upon the story of Icarus and Daedalus. And Icarus trying to become what his father was, but going too high and then crashing down. Not that I want my son to crash down, but I definitely want him to go higher. So that's been a large part of learning how to make new work, but also being able to share it within a community spaces.
So cool, Harry. Right now, I serve as the director of artistic programming at Arena Stage. For a few more months, I'm soon to assume the position of associate artistic director at the Cleveland Playhouse. So I've moved into working as a director, a choreographer, a theater administrator, organizational leader. And, after Adventures in Wonderland, it gave me the opportunity to do a lot of stuff. I did a lot of sitcoms and movies and things in LA, and went back to New York, did more work in the theater. And so I've gotten to do so much great fun performing in front of this camera and on the stage, and as well behind the scenes, working as a director, a writer, working as a producer in New York. I did the New York revival of Tennessee Williams' The Two-Character Play, starring Amanda Plummer and Brad Dourif. I served as a producer on that. So I've gotten to do a lot of really special things, but I am so excited that I'm getting to continue to make a contribution as an artistic leader with the Cleveland Playhouse, and I'll be going there in August, and have loved serving my time at Arena Stage and continuing to make contributions to those two wonderful organizations. It's been really, really a privilege for me. So life is good. Yes. No complaints.
I'm so glad to hear the Tweedles are doing well. And so I think what we should end with is 3 Disney questions I always ask my guests. Hey. I call them the Fab 3, so we'll start with the Donald one. And Harry, you can go first, and then Robert, you can follow with your answers. Our Donald question is, as a child, what Disney film was one of your favorites to see in the movie theater?
Oh my goodness. I'd have to say Mary Poppins. Because Dick Van Dyke was the exact perfect person. When he pulled down his pants and he was a penguin, my God, that was theater magic.
I'd say bed broomsticks, but what was the one where Don Knotts was underwater?
The Incredible Mr. Limpet.
Those kind of really captured my imagination. Something about those 2 movies.
And our goofy question, what Disney character, besides the Tweedles, do you think would be your best friend if you met them in person?
Because it's on my top 10 list of films that I love, is Dumbo, because he gets so abused and he doesn't want anything but to be with his mother.
I'm going to say Pinocchio, because that's just a completely weird, freaky story that I think is like
yes.
I think it's like so deeply imaginative. It's got so many kind of psychological, interesting layers to it, that it's a famous Disney film, I think, that was made really accessible to a lot of American youth, is kind of just a masterful taking this cultural icon and making it so accessible in such a wonderful way.
And finally, our Mickey question. If I asked you to name any Disney song at this very moment, what immediately comes to mind?
MICKYMOUA.
Yeah. I mean, what else? Small World, after all. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm the only person that will go to Disneyland and make people ride the Small World ride.
Well, I have to thank you both so much for coming on the show, and I would love it if you both could maybe end with a riff between the Tweedles themselves about how much they love their fans, the Adventure in Wonderland fans.
Well, I always go, because my students also remind me, there's two shows that they always see. The one, of course, is the Funky Spelunkers. And the other one,
Oh, yeah.
Tap dancing
Oh, my
Spelunking.
God.
Oh my God. And the other one, of course, is We're the Rhyme Doctors. Tweedle Dum, Tweedle Dee. We're the Rhyme Doctors. Yeah, yeah. We're the Rhyme Doctors. Tweedle Dum, Tweedle Dee. Because for us, designing and reciting a rhyme is as easy as Parcheesi.
Yeah, to all Adventures in Wonderland fans, we so appreciate you, and I can't tell you, you made me appreciate what a special thing that show was by your enthusiasm for it and your dedication to it. So anyone who's ever had a kind word to say about the show and about the work that we did, thank you. We deeply appreciate you.
As they say, without you, we are nothing. And thank you so much for all that love. And Tammy, thank you so much for following up and just being such a force of nature, of just making sure that we do finally connect and share these stories. It's great to have people like you in the world that are this enthusiastic and positive.
We really appreciate you. Thanks.
Tweedle Dum, Tweedle Dee, because for us, defining and refining a rhyme is as easy as Parcheesi.